going to go into the techniques on how it takes to purify our bodies. Let me ask you a question. Can a disease exist in a pure body? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Well, we're going to find out that our lymphatic system is our purification system. Did you say that? Our lymphatic system is our purification system. Now, you might know that the lymphatic system is not being taught. How it works and what it does is not being taught in any college, university, or medical school in the United States. Because if the lymphatic system is our purification system, and if you can't have a disease in a pure body, if they would teach people how to activate the lymphatic system, what would happen?
No business.
Okay, with those who have diseases today. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how to overcome disease, not just to treat the disease, but how to conquer disease on this earth. Because we're going to raise up a people in this short period of time who will be totally without disease on this earth. I believe the time is coming when we will have to raise up that people. It's been talked about so much. People who will not fight nor quarrel. We won't have any anger, no loss of temper, no holding grudges, resentment. We won't ridicule, criticize, condemn, find fault, or cast blame. Because when you do these things, you're going to find out that will upset your purification system. It'll alter this system. And instead of having a pure body, then your body goes into an impure state, and they can call disease what they may want to call it. A disease or a problem in the body is caused from a body that's becoming, whether it's diseased or being degenerated inside, but the body becoming from a pure state to an impure state, right? And the more impure the body becomes, then the loss of energy takes place first, and we're going to explain that. How the loss of energy is going to take place first. And then as you get loss of energy, as you get more, as the body becomes more impure, then the pain is going to come out. And then pretty quick, one of the organs isn't going to function right. And that organ's not going to work, another organ's not going to work. And they're going to call it this disease or that disease. Now, one thing we're going to know before this session's over, and that is the name of the problem, the name of the disease means nothing anymore. But very few people realize that we have more lymphatic vessels in our body than we have blood vessels. More. Not just a minute, we have more. We're going to show you the research where it was discovered in 1961 by Dr. Arthur C. Guyton that the cells, in order to get oxygen from the blood, have to be in what he calls the dry state. Now in the dry state, he says there's no excess fluid around the cells. Only enough fluid to fill the crevices around the cells, and that's all. Now that's called what state?
Dry.
The dry state, exactly. And in the dry state, the cells get oxygen. So that's the most important to remember right now, that that's the state they have to be in to get oxygen. If it's in the dry state that the cells get oxygen, there's only one thing that can alter the dry state. What has to alter the dry state? Water, right? Water, exactly. Exactly. And the blood is 91% water. That's right. So the water has to come from the bloodstream. So somehow, the water comes out of the bloodstream, and when the water leaves the bloodstream to get around the cells, the excess fluid out there, the excess fluid, is going to alter the dry state and produce a lack of what? Oxygen. Exactly. Now, if you put your hands over your nose and mouth and hold on for a while, or somebody else does, we don't live very long. True or false?
True.
Okay. Then would you agree with me that anything that would produce lack of oxygen at the cell level would cause the body to degenerate and die? Is that right? Okay. So the only thing that can produce lack of oxygen out there then is if the water would come out of the dry state and produce lack of oxygen, and when that happens, then the body would begin to what, say it? Degenerate and die. In other words, this would be the cause of every degenerative disease known to man. We degenerate and die. Well, the first thing you experience out here, when the water comes out and you produce lack of oxygen, the first thing you're going to have is loss of energy, right? Loss of energy, right? Because if the body's healthy, where the body's going to have energy, right? And so one thing we can say, and that is health is energy. Say it.
Health.
Is energy. In fact, every disease you can think about is associated with the loss of what? Energy. Okay. That's really something. Well, I want you to know that if we get anywhere near that dry state, where we have oxygen, and the energy just goes sky high, we would be able to run at least 150 to 200 miles without rest. Now, that's done by the Taino Indians down in northwest Mexico. They've been doing this for a number of years. And they're human beings down there. They're not just people that just have wings. They really exist down there. The first sign of a disease then, the first thing that we're going to experience in this system is loss of energy. That's the first sign of a disease. True? We're going to have the loss of energy first. And then we're going to go into pain, because pain is lack of oxygen. When a person has a heart attack, the pain for the heart attack doesn't come until the blood supply is shut off. If you put a tourniquet on your arm, okay. If you sit on you put a tourniquet on your arm and it hurts. If you sit on a hard chair long enough, it'll get sore, right? Okay. So the next thing you want to get is pain is lack of oxygen. That's right. Now, not only is pain lack of oxygen, but cancer is lack of oxygen. Say that one. Cancer is lack of oxygen. Now, not only is cancer lack of oxygen, so is arthritis and MS and polio, cerebral palsy. We're going to, as we go through this session, you're going to come to understand as the water comes out and all of the dry state, the first thing you get is loss of energy. But if pain is lack of oxygen and we can relieve the pain, we're going to find out that we can relieve that pain. Then if cancer is also lack of oxygen, and arthritis is also lack of oxygen, and the MS and polio and cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy and the viral infections, the bacterial infections, and the allergies and the AIDS, if it's all lack of oxygen, if through this science we can relieve pain in a very short period of time, I mean in seconds, in about 3 seconds we have pain on those arms. And if I don't know another science in the world can do that. True or false? Okay? That's why this science is, we believe, it is the health revelation of the century. This is the science. It has taken us 17 years to get the information together that we're now giving you tonight. So now, since we've learned about this science now, and learned that the water out here produces lack of oxygen, and lack of oxygen, the muscles constrict. When you break a bone, the muscles will offset because of the lack of oxygen. The muscle will pull the bone like this, so they'll be like this. We found out that if you could just do something and get the water out of there, this is what we've learned. The little boy broke his toe, and the mother got this lymphatic system working, and the lymph system pulls out the water, takes it down the dry state. There's oxygen, and the body can heal. A little baby found a septic tank, 11 months old. Take them 10 minutes to find the child, to come out of the hospital after several weeks blind and permanent brain damage. The doctors tell the family it'll be an infant the rest of its life. The family takes it home, moves the lymphatics, pulls the water out, gets the oxygen in. And in 5 days, day and night, they worked with that child. Pretty quick, the eyesight returned. The girl was working with her. The babies are looking around. She ran out to the farm where the parents were. Mama, I think the baby can see. They come back in, the baby could see. They took that child to the doctor. He says, I've never seen it. The doctors and nurses gathered around. They give it every test they could give it. And they said, this cannot be the same child. There is no brain damage. This child is perfect. 5 days, day and night. Now that took faith, true or false?
True.
But to have the faith, it took the understanding to have the faith to perform that miracle, true? It was a miracle that that boy's eyesight come back, but it didn't happen without what? Number 3. Everybody has to what? Work. Everybody has to work. In this science, we can teach you how to activate your lymph system, but it takes work, okay? Isn't it interesting? It's the blood protein that holds that water. And all the adversary has to do to kill us is get us to trap our own blood protein and cause our disease and death. So what does the adversary say? God says, don't fight and argue and quarrel, don't defy your body, and everybody works. The devil comes along, and on that television, what do we say? What do we say? Fight and argue and quarrel, defy your body, and everybody be lazy. True or false? I think what I'd like to do before I want to get into, we talk about healing in a billionth of a second and how things heal. And everything is energy, and everything, the body's electrical, the minds are electrical, and so forth. And I'm going to get in Dr. Bjorn Nordström a little bit later, how he puts the electrodes right into the tumor. And the energy moves the lymphatics and pulls out the water, takes it down to the dry state, and then the white blood cells destroy the cancer cells. I just want you to say something. Energy moves lymphatics. Say it. Energy moves lymphatics. Exactly. And that's how come this works. There's 4,000 people a day die with just heart disease and cancer alone. And we're going to show you how the water comes out. It produces the high blood pressure. It produces the heart disease. You get down to the dry state we talked about where cells get oxygen. The body there is in a pure state. If that is true, can the body have a disease? Yes or no?
No.
That's right. There is no cancer. And you're going to come to know that as sure as you know you're here. There's no cancer. Just like Dr. Bjorn Nordström putting the electrodes in the tumor, drawing the water out, the white blood cells destroy the cancer cells, and they give him the people who's going to die. The people, they give him the terminal cases. And they saved him. By putting energy in, move lymphatics, okay? There's a number of things that move lymphatics, but this is just the destruction. The water's coming out with cancer, okay? And if we knew that there's 4,000 people a day dying of this heart disease and cancer alone because of this water out here, you know, if we just had one plane with 80 men, women, and children in every plane being shot out of the sky every day, would that be a catastrophe? We've never had it, have we? I don't think there's ever been a time in history when there's been one plane shot out of the sky every day with 80 men, women, and children in every plane. It hasn't been done. True or false? Do you know the destruction from this right now today? Do you have any idea what it is? It isn't one plane. It isn't 5. It isn't 10. It isn't 20. It isn't 30. It isn't 40. It is 50 planes today with 80 men, women, and children in every plane being shot out of the sky with heart disease and cancer alone that's been destroyed because there's water out here. Dr. Joseph Waltz in New York, he's at the St. Barnabas Hospital, and he's putting electrodes down the spine. And he's bringing previously helpless cerebral palsy, MS, and polio patients out of wheelchairs. Got to have you come. Just put your chest right on the back. It's fine. You know, when I learned about Dr. Joseph Waltz in New York, I called him. And I said, Dr. Waltz, are you really doing these things here at the St. Barnabas Hospital? I mean, an 18-year-old girl confined in a wheelchair was able to walk unassisted and feed herself after that treatment? He says, yes. Now, he's putting electrodes down the spine. We just learned something, and what we learned was energy moves lymphatics. In fact, what we're going to find moves lymphatics is deep breathing, bouncing, stroking, and energy. But the thing we're talking about right now is energy, moves lymphatics. We've already talked about Dr. Bjorn Nordström from Sweden, putting the electrodes down in the tumor, right in the tumor. The energy moves lymphatic, pulls out the water, takes it down the dry state, then the white blood cells destroy the cancer cells, okay? Are you beginning to understand? Yes or no? Okay, so here Dr. Joseph Waltz, putting electrodes down the spine, bringing previously helpless cerebral palsy, MS, and polio patients out of wheelchairs. An 18-year-old girl confined in a wheelchair was able to walk unassisted and feed herself. I said, did that happen? He said, yes. And I called him. And I was reading this, I said, out of the paper, so I got it. So I called him. I said, you mean a 17-year-old palsy victim was suddenly able to control her bladder, speak clearly, and use her hands again? He said, yes. I said, could you explain to me how it works? He said, not really. And I said, could I give you my theories, what I think you're doing? He said, go ahead. And I says, I believe the energy moves lymphatics. And it pulls out the water from the tissue spaces, takes you down the dry state, discovered by Dr. Arthur C. Guyton. When that happens, the energy, the oxygen comes in, you establish the electrical field from brain to muscles, and people get up and walk. And if it happens, how fast could it happen? Say it. In a billion of a second. What Thomas Edison said will become a reality. That the doctor, the future, will give no medicine. but will interest or teach his patients about the care of this human frame, about diet, and about the cause and prevention of disease. And if anybody's a doctor of the future, that's ambassadors for health and peace. It's going to be me and you and everybody else out there. And these doctors don't have to have a license to teach. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that exciting? Mm-hmm. No license required to help people. Isn't that exciting? You can become a good Samaritan. Nobody stop you. Why? Because we're teaching pure laws and principles. We're teaching these laws, the laws that says that we can't what? We can't fight and argue and quarrel. We can't defile our body. Everybody has to work. Okay? And because of these laws, we put it right on the First Amendment. Right on the First Amendment. This is the whole basis of the book. We go to 7+1. Pay attention to those laws. We're going to learn not to fight and argue and quarrel. We're going to give this to you in detail before you get to session 2. You'll understand in detail how the anger, how the loss of temper, holding grudges and resentment, if you ridicule, criticize, condemn, and find fault with yourself or anybody else, is potential suicide, potential murder. We can't do it anymore. And that's the vow we're going to make. I just want to spend just a minute now and explain to you the man who helped make this work all possible. His name was Dr. H.S. Mayerson. This man right here. He published his research in the Scientific American Journal in June of 1963. This man was the man who did the major research on the water leaving the bloodstream with old blood proteins to cause disease and death. And when he published this article, he revealed the history in here. And he talked in here, he says, the second circulation, this lymphatic system, remember the branches up in the head, the roots in the feet, the second circulation, plays an essential role in maintaining the body's steady state, which is what state? The dry state. Draining from the spaces between the cells, fluid, protein, and other substances that leak out of the bloodstream. And you see it notice here how the bloodstream goes down to the bed of the cells. The lymph system goes up in between the cells. Can you see that? So when you activate the lymph system, you're going to pull out the dead cells and poisons. True? And as you pull it out of there, the dead cells and poisons come up to these lymph nodes. And as it comes up through the lymph nodes, and here he has a picture right here, and that's in the Scientific Journal. Can you pick that up? Okay. As it comes up through the lymph nodes, as it comes up through this tree system, all the dead cells and poisons are totally neutralized. See, the water goes back and forth like this. The 91% water in the blood goes back and forth. The blood, it contains the dissolved minerals, nutrients, and oxygen to give the cells. The lymph system picks up some of this water, the dead cells and poisons, and before it brings it up and dumps it back in the bloodstream, where it comes up this tree system, comes up the thoracic duct here in the chest, and where it dumps into the bloodstream, up here the subclavian vein at the base of the neck, before it does that, all the dead cells and poisons are totally neutralized. It comes up as pure water. The lymphatic system is our what? It's our purification system. As we learn to move the lymphatic system, how? By deep breathing, bouncing, stroking, and energy, we're going to be able to move that water out of there, right? Move it out, get down the dry state, and in the dry state, can you have cancer? Yes or no?
No.
There's no cancer, because the white blood cells can destroy the cancer cells, documented medically. Over and over we got this documented. There's no viral infections, bacterial infections, allergies, or even AIDS. Not even those. It's only out here the water comes out. Now there's lack of oxygen, and the white blood cells cannot work in lack of oxygen. Therefore, you go into the immune deficiency syndromes, which would be cancer or whatever. The viral infections, bacteria, the allergies, the AIDS, or whatever. If that water accumulates in joints, over here the minerals stay in solution. There's no arthritis over here. They don't deposit in joints and in your eyes to cause cataracts or arteries, to cause hardening of the arteries. The water over here works fine. All the life processes work great because there's oxygen here. But you get over where there's lack of oxygen and you start to alter the life processes, which are electrical. You alter those electrical fields. Then the minerals, if it's happening to joints, fall out of solution. If the minerals fall out in joints, what do they call it? Arthritis, eyes, cataracts, arteries. Artery the arteries, right. And if this water accumulates in muscles, and you, with lack of oxygen, you alter the electrical fields from brain to muscles, then you go into what? MS, polio, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy. Like Dr. Joseph Waltz in New York, he put the electrodes down the spine, and he takes previously helpless, moves the water out, takes them to the dry state, and brings previously helpless cerebral palsy, MS, and polio patients out of wheelchairs. Now, are you understanding? Yes or no?
Yes.
Now, are you understanding that if you learn how to activate that lymphatic system, that you can do it yourself? Yes or no?
Yes.
And how do we activate it? Through what? Deep breathing, bouncing, stroking, and energy. June of '63, when Marison published this, and he talked about the lymphatic system draining from the spaces between the cells, fluid, protein, and other substances that leak out of the bloodstream. To maintain that what state? The dry state, exactly. Well, he talks about in here the history of this thing. It was at the Harvard Medical School, 1930. And he says Cecil K. Drinker challenged the Starling's hypothesis that said that blood protein in water didn't leave the bloodstream. He challenged that. In his experiments, he proved that it did leave the bloodstream. And he says when the blood proteins leave the bloodstream, the only way out is through the lymphatic system. It had to be pulled out this way. It had to be removed by the lymph system to then return to the bloodstream. And he tagged these blood proteins, the albumin and so forth, the albumin, the globulin, the fibrinogen, and tagged them to see how much come out of there. He found about half of them left every 24 hours. The lymphatic system had to pull them out. And he says, well, the people at that time knew that if they accepted Drinker's theories, that this would give the answer to pain, suffering, death by disease. He says, teachers and writers of textbooks continued to maintain that healthy blood capillaries did not leak protein. Okay? Which was not the truth. Drinker found out they come through. And so it was an effort to clarify this point. The Marison says that I undertook an investigation of lymph and lymphatics some 15 years ago. That means from 63 to 1948. And he started going into this system, and then he found through tagging these blood proteins that they left the bloodstream. And from 1948 to 1963, and he published it. But between 48 and 63, Marison lectured for people like Dr. Guyton. And he told me, when I went to visit him in 1978, he says, I told Arthur one day at the train station to get in that laboratory and find out about the lymph system, and Dr. Guyton did. And that's when he went in, and Dr. Guyton discovered this dry state condition where there's no excess fluid around the cells, only enough fluid to fill the crevices around the cells, and that's all. And here's the dry state. And so Guyton published this in 1961 in his medical text, the second edition, in 1961. He discovered the dry state. And he also talked about these blood proteins. And he says here, as Marison says, who's a pretty good reader? Who's a good reader? Would you like to read out loud and just read, we shall see right there? Yes, if you would, please.
We shall see that this removal of proteins from the interstitial spaces is an absolutely essential function, without which we would die within about 24 hours.
How many hours?
24.
24. Isn't that something? And he said, removal of protein from the spaces around the cells, that once the blood protein come out around the cells from the interstitial spaces, or the space around the cells, that they must be removed by lymphatics or could cause their death within about 24 hours. Okay. Now, Guyton published that in 1961. It's been in his medical text ever since. It was in 1974 that I got this research in my hands. And this is what I read, because I was relieving pain in our pain clinic, which I had in Arizona at that time. I was teaching chemistry during the day and had the pain clinic at night. And I started relieving pain in miraculous ways with energy. Real tremendous. I got studying with some doctors who use energy to heal. And when the pain started coming out the way it was, I went across all to Chase, who taught biology. And I said, Chase, I've got to get into it. You have a good book on circulation? Yes, here's a medical text. Somebody gave it to me. Take it and see if you can use it. And he put that book in my hand. And when I read that statement changed my life, because I had pre-med, I had biochemistry. I never heard anything like this. I called surgeons, doctors, the top medical minds, and I couldn't find one soul who knew anything about this. And they're still not teaching it today. They're not spending this right there. But in this text, as long as it's been out since 1961, the most widely used textbook in physiology in the whole United States, they're still not teaching anything about the blood proteins leaving the bloodstream that must be removed by the lymphatic system. In December of '64, the American Medical Association picked up and they published Marison's work. And now here's what the MA said in December of '64 as they quoted Dr. Marison's work, who published his work in '63. Let's read this first paragraph.
Loss of blood proteins through capillary walls would be particularly disastrous. Recently, Dr. H.S. Marison of Tulane Medical School tagged blood proteins with radioactive iodine, then measured the rate at which they passed into lymph vessels. Calculations indicated that half of our blood protein is lost from the blood every 24 hours. But for the prompt retrieval of the protein by the lymphatic system, this constant loss would spell swift catastrophe.
After I learned about this, with the physics background, I was able to produce these formulas. This is the formula for the dry state. This is the formula for the disease state. And once we understand these equations, we have the answer to there is, in this dry state, there is no pain and there is no disease. That's what this formula says. Let me just give it to you just briefly so you understand it again. In Mayerson, first of all, Cecil K. Drinker in 1930. Mayerson picked it up between 48 and 63. He published it in the Scientific American Journal. He taught Dr. Guyton. Dr. Guyton published it in 61. Mayerson published it in 63. The AMA published it in 64. The Reader Digest picked it up in January of 65. And then in 1966, this organization was formed. And this is where all the research on blood protein was put. Okay? I won't go into too much detail about that. Let me just say that somehow somebody brought all the lymphologists throughout the world, even behind the Iron Curtain, and they met with Dr. Mayerson in 1966, and they formed an organization. And this is the only place you find it. Now, if somebody wants to go into more detail, I'll tell you more about this later. I'm a member of this organization. I know who they are. I know they have the research on the blood protein research, okay? When I gave these formulas, they said to me, if you teach these formulas, you're going to be able to close the hospitals. How many want to do that? Okay. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about that dry state. No excess fluid. We're talking about this dry state. No pain and no disease. And that's exactly what it says. And so I told him, I said, you're in the society. I'm going to start the academy. And we're going to teach this to the world. They says, go ahead. We're all for education. Go do it. And so in 1982, we come back and started the International Academy of Nephrology. And this is how it got started. They heard we organized the academy, and in the next bulletin, they said that an International Academy of Nephrology was started in Orem, Utah, by Samuel West to teach this research to lay people. They had to certify nephologists to teach in the worldwide family health education centers. Now, I didn't put it in there. They put it in their journal. It was 1982. In 1982, the book, The Goal 7+1, was produced. I wanted to give you this. It's taken 17 years to get this documentation together to where we have it all from 1930 to 1991, that it is the blood proteins that come out with the water to produce what? Said the pain, the suffering, and the death by disease, which means when we learn how to activate the lymph system, we pull out the water, we bring it down the dry state, and we can raise up people who will what? Live in peace without pain or disease. Is your understanding increasing? Okay. When you got the pain out, if we brought out some of the poisons, if there's any poisons left in there, it's going to reproduce the problem. True or false? Let me just show you something. Damning cells put off poisons. Poisons are poisons because, say it. Poisons are poisons because they let the water out of the bloodstream, over the dry state, produce lack of oxygen. That's how poisons kill. You feed an animal poison, they go for water. Okay? Brings water out and makes you thirsty. This is how poisons kill. That means if you put anything inside of your mouth that makes you thirsty, is it a food or a poison? What makes you thirsty? Salt, sugar, candies, cakes, ice cream, pop, and too much meat. Say it. Salt, sugar, candies, cakes, ice cream, pop, and too much meat. You damage cells, it puts off poisons. If you damage cells inside of your body, with what? Tea, coffee, liquor, tobacco, soft drinks, and drugs. Say it. Man-made tea, coffee, liquor, tobacco, soft drinks, and drugs. And you damage cells inside of your body, like take a hammer to your organs. You get a smashed finger. If that smashed finger sticks up with the water out there, and that's in your liver, they call it cancer. Just that's what it is. All you got to do is pull that water out, take down the dry state, and white blood cells destroy it. But you do that, that's come right out through the air. But this is what we're talking about, and this is what we did here. We pulled the water out, brought some oxygen in, okay, and the pain went away. But if there's any poisons out there, it'll reproduce the problem. True or false? So you have to do those techniques every 5 minutes, first 5 or 6 times, every half hour, the rest of the day. Say it. Wash the cells, feed the cells, purify the cells. Share this with your families, your communities. Get the information, get the research, study it, and share it. Okay? Because these are the people, as you go to help other people, to teach them the principles of how to overcome disease, whose life are you going to save? Yourself. That's right. This is one hill. We don't get the top of ourselves.